Hey, a few weeks back, we got a chance to talk to the authors of the new book, Dungeons and Dreamers. The book was written by Brad King and John Borland, and of course, it features our guy in the first act, Richard Garriott. So let's take a look at that interview from a few weeks back. Millions of people assume alternate identities and go online in fully immersive world to talk to other people.
Yes. I do all the time.
But it all comes back to the early days of pencil and paper role-playing game, and the journey between the two is fascinating. Dungeons and Dreamers, The Rise of Computer Game Culture from Geek to Chic is the book, and John Borland and Brad King are the writers. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Welcome to the show.
I tell you,
our virtual world.
Yeah, our little virtual world. It is fascinating. You write about, you know, the early days of kind of Dungeons and Dragons and paper and pencil role-playing game, and now when you look to Star Wars Galaxies and EverQuest 2, the journey has been fascinating. Talk about why you wrote this book and why the story is so interesting.
You know, one of the things that we wanted to do, we were sitting down trying to conceive, what would a book about video games be about? And we wanted to really tell a story of players and people and why it was that they were attracted to games that allowed them to take on other roles. And that story hadn't really been told. I mean, there had been a lot of books about games themselves and a lot of books about business, but not really anything about what it was that makes people sort of enjoy coming and being somebody else.
The psychology of playing as a guy that is old.
Or just finding other people that, you know, like to make up characters. Like, what about that is fun?
This is not really a book about people who are sitting in front of a computer. This is a book about people who are sitting together. You know, whether they were originally sitting in their, you know, in their bedroom, you know, kind of rolling dice with each other and really telling stories about Dungeons and Dragons, or, you know, in Star Wars Galaxies, you know, it's, you know, thousands of people spread out around the world who are really kind of in the same world together, regardless of whether or not they're actually in front of their computer alone in their bedroom or not.
And why choose somebody like Richard Garriott as your protagonist, as somebody to sort of lead the story?
Because he lives in a castle.
He does live in a castle.
Okay. Yeah, his history is the history of gaming, really. I mean, he learned Dungeons and Dragons when he was a high school kid, you know, when he was away at summer camp at a college. Brought it back to his hometown, you know, started playing with all his kids. Learned how to program. You know, his dad was an astronaut and was into science. You know, I mean, this is a kid with, you know, a magical childhood. So he invents a game with magic in it. But yeah, he led that through decades. He was one of the guys who introduced, you know, morality into games, you know, ways of, you know, questioning yourself, you know, which really let games mature. And then his game was the first really commercially successful, massively multiplayer game where hundreds and thousands of people could be on the same world at the same time. So this is the history of gaming, and you know, wrapped up.
Now, I know you guys must have encountered a bunch of stories about what happens when these people get together in these worlds and things that they do. Why don't you tell me one of your favorite or most outlandish stories of, like, the things people do when they're living online?
One of the initial things that happened in Ultima Online was, you know, people were a little bit worried about, you know, the bugs, and it was slow and just it wasn't working that well because it was new.
He's getting a kick out of this already.
Yeah, you know,
I know where this is going.
I know this story.
You know, and so.
Oh, that one kills me.
So I'm glad you guys liked that story. So anyway, people decided to have a protest. You know, they didn't call up, you know, customer service or something. They got, you know, dozens, hundreds of these people, you know, all decided to go in the same room at the same time, took off all their little virtual clothes, started drinking their virtual drinks, so they were drunk, so vomiting all over this room. And there's so many people that are just like slowing down. It's like not working. So all these drunk, slow, vomiting people all over the place. It's like
sounds like a party.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's like, okay, they're protesting. This is a real world for them. They're protesting within the rules of the world.
Well,
Doing what we would do normally. Which is get naked and drunk.
I have to tell you, I really enjoy a lot of the stories. I remember a lot of the things, like when Lord British comes out to address everyone, he forgot to turn on invulnerability, and he was killed in front of hundreds of players. And it was just something that people couldn't believe had happened. The experiences are so real to the people who play in these online worlds. I have a question from Don Fubar. He says, would you consider this to be the golden age of gaming? Kind of goes from the 70s to now. Where does the golden age actually occur?
I actually think that the golden age might be like 5 years from now. Like, I think that we're about to see some things that we can't even. You see game companies that are developing the virtual reality screens that you can touch and play. Like, come on, like, I'll never leave the house.
It was really interesting.
Thank you guys so much for
Thank you
coming
so
out.
much.
Really appreciate it. Good luck with the book.
Fascinating book.